I am Andrea Masterson. I am the Donor Engagement Consultant on the Board of Directors of KY IEP Advocate. And today I am with Shannon Masterson, who's the host of this podcast and the founder and executive director of KY IEP Advocate. Shannon, you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the organization?
I am Shannon, the executive director, like Andrea said. I have been an occupational therapist since 2007 and started Kentucky IEP Advocate as a nonprofit organization in 2021. I was finishing some school contracts that I had for 4 to 5 years by then and supporting parents through my private practice as an occupational therapist. So I was seeing school-age kids in their homes and offering them access to information and advocacy strategies for their students and their kids, while also working in the schools and seeing that the parents outside of school were having a very different experience than what I perceived the parents in school to be having, because the parents I was working with had different access to information as opposed to the parents in school that did not have access to that information. So it became really clear really fast that parents needed access to reliable, accurate information about the special education process and how to effectively advocate for their child in it. So I started doing this on the side, and then my impulsive personality just jumped in and I started a nonprofit in about 6 weeks. So that's how we got to where we are now.
Yeah, I remember a conversation with you over the phone when you were talking really passionately and like about all of your ideas and all of the things that you wanted to do and all of the people that were untapped. And I was like, this would be a really great nonprofit. Maybe you should think about over the next year putting together a business plan for I guess in that point it was like 2022. And like 2 days later you texted me and you were like, okay, so I filled out all the paperwork. I need articles of inclusion or something. Like you were just like ready to go 2 days later, hit the ground running, which I think is a really great example of like who you are as a person, the executive director of this organization, and like your passion to really like help children and families.
I think what's interesting is that when I was talking to you about this, then I already realized that I had a bunch of people that I was surrounding myself with. Like my brother-in-law is an attorney. He was familiar with nonprofits. I have some really good friends. They have a sister who is now also a really good friend who was auditing nonprofits as a CPA. And so these people have already been in my life. I just had not really approached them yet to support me in this way. And now they do.
And I guess that's a sneak peek to later episodes of the podcast. You'll meet some of these other people that she just mentioned that will be a part of this podcast. So just to kind of set the foundation for folks, let's start really basic. Just can you explain what an IEP is?
So those are the middle 3 letters of our nonprofit organization. Kentucky is because that is where we are located. IEP is Individualized Education Program. That's the name of the document that once a student is eligible for special education services, that's the name of the document that includes their present levels, their goals, any modifications to the program, any accommodations that they're entitled to, and all of the services that they'll be getting. So that's the name of the big document that everybody's always trying to get their hands on so they can know what their kid's going to get and how their kid's going to get helped.
So what do you anticipate, like how would you describe what this podcast might look like and what future episodes might come to fruition?
So right now I've thought about this a couple of different ways, and I think the way that makes the most sense to get started is just providing some what feels like basic information, but is also the foundational information. So it is basic and it is about the regulations and about the documents that are used throughout this process. And then once we've laid the groundwork for that, then we can start talking about the more nuanced parts of the process and what happens when things don't go as planned and what happens when you don't feel like you're heard in meetings, and who are the different professionals in the community and at school who are all engaged in this process at different times. So starting from the beginning, hopefully being able to build a good foundation of knowledge so that people have a good understanding of what to expect when you start in this process. Also having a good understanding, because I'm not here to lie to anybody, that you can have that expectation and your school district may not actually meet your expectations. So you also need to know what to do then and how to communicate with them then. But in order to know that things are not headed down the road that you want them to go, you need to be able to have that map. And if you don't have the map to know where things are headed, then how do you know if they're kind of off the rails a little bit? So that's where we're
I'm
starting.
excited. Yeah, I'm excited. I think this will be really great and a great resource for people as they are kind of navigating the process, trying to figure out what to pay attention to, what not to pay attention to, when to kind of jump in, when to ask for help, like all of those things. I think it's gonna help a lot of people.
Well, and talking about like in the future, I would love to have, and I know that there are some experts on our radar about who to come in who are experts in their own field and how that relates to special education. But also recognizing that when you're a parent and you start in this process, you don't know what you don't know. So one thing that Andrea and I've been really intentional about in talking about getting this started is making sure that these very preliminary conversations are had with somebody with information and questions are being asked by somebody without, because that's where the breakdown often happens. Is people don't know what they don't know, so you don't know what questions to be asking and what to be looking for if you don't even know the words to use. So hopefully these first few episodes are easy enough to listen to, because they will reach the people who don't even know if maybe they are a part of this process or they could be a part of this process, or if you are in this process, you have a better understanding of the acronyms and the words and the documents and phrases that people are using, and why sometimes they feel like words, in fact, they are really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if anyone is just trying to like wrap their brain around everything, you have a lot of resources and things that you've already kind of put out into the world on your website, kyepadvocate.org, correct?
Yes, yes,
Great.
there's lots of information from me that I have put together. There's also links. We are a Kentucky based organization primarily supporting families in Kentucky, but I do talk, I would say on occasion, but maybe a little more regularly, to families definitely in Indiana because they're right across the river. Um, but for sure in Tennessee and Ohio as well. So we are a Kentucky based organization. So the links that you see on our website will all be Kentucky Department of Education links. But we go through those pretty regularly to make sure that they are not broken links, because the Department of Education rearranges things. And if we don't update our link, then you can't get to the information that you're looking for. But the idea is giving an explanation of what each document is, why it's important, and then somebody can access that on the Department of Education's website. So you know when you go to a meeting what they're talking about and what those forms and documents already look like.
Yeah. And I'll just do a little plug for you and your organization that has been an underlying theme that you've always kind of stood really tall on your soapbox about, that, um, you know, no family should be excluded from this process. So there shouldn't be information and resources hidden behind a paywall. They should be easily accessible, easily understood for all people in all different kinds of ways. So hopefully this podcast will just be another arm of that, of just making sure that whoever needs information, needs resources and support will have easy access to it.
That is definitely one of the reasons why I pivoted from what was barely a for-profit business. It was not very profitable in the for-profit business and is way more profitable as a nonprofit business at this point. But that is one of the reasons why I did pivot, because I realized in the couple of years that I was supporting parents, I was supporting people who knew that they could afford to pay a fee to work with somebody to get that information. Or I was having very short, superficial conversations with people because they did not feel like they could afford it. So they weren't following up. There was no way to kind of get more information out to them. And I realized that the there's a really huge subset of parents and caregivers involved in special education that if you don't have access to the funds to support hiring an advocate or hiring an attorney to represent your child in these meetings, then you're kind of just embedded as another layer into this process that really isn't working to benefit you or your child in some ways. So I really believe that being able to pay for information that is already readily available on the internet doesn't feel good to me. So just because that information is readily available doesn't mean that you know why it's important or you know where to find it or you understand the words that they're using when they describe it. But I don't think that you should have to pay to get access to free information. Plus, ultimately, something we will get to later is that any student eligible for special education is entitled to a free, appropriate public education. And if you are paying for information to learn about that process, it doesn't feel free anymore.
Yeah. I'm really excited for your podcast and for all of the people to be able to like chime in, ask you questions, get more information. I know that having just been your sister and like listening to you for years and years talk about it, let alone since 2021 when you started this organization, like I learn so much on a daily basis, not as a mom and not as an educator, but as just someone in the world. Um, who this is also, you know, affecting and touching. And so I'm excited for those who are like closer to your circle, closer to kind of the needs to get to know what's going on and to be able to have access to it. I think it's gonna be amazing and I'm really excited for you to do it.
Thanks. I'm really excited. I think this is another layer of something to add. We have a website that has information. We have a Facebook group that parents can and school employees. We're getting a lot more school employees these days. Instagram, I'm not as good at that. So there is information there, but it is a little sparse compared to Facebook or our website. But one thing that's really important to me, just as an occupational therapist, is providing people a variety of ways to learn things. And so if reading things on a website is not for you and is not the best way to learn, and engaging in a Facebook group is not the best way to learn, then maybe listening to something or watching a video will give you a different way to access this same information.
Yeah. So even if you're listening to this right now and maybe it only kind of applies, but like someone else is really ringing a bell in your head, like share it to anyone that you think might be a supporter, that might be in need of resources, that might be just a lifelong learner and wants to learn and know more about kind of the world around them and different things that are going on. And visit that website and the Instagram and her Facebook if you've got any questions or you want to help support in any way.